Okay, we will begin today's event again with a land acknowledgement. Apologies. We respectfully acknowledge the territory in which we gather and in which this event is being recorded as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk and the islands of Newfoundland as the ancestral homeland of the Mi'kmaq and Beothuk. We would also like to recognize the Inuit of Nunatsiavut and Nunatukavut and the Innu of Nitassinan and their ancestors as the original people of Labrador. We strive for respectful relationships with all the peoples of this province as we search for collective healing and true reconciliation and honor this beautiful land together. And now I'll hand it over.
Thank you, Terry. That was beautiful. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bethany Jacobs, and I will be the moderator for this panel today. I want to thank you for coming, taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today and talk about what it is like to be a part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community as a professional. I'm in my fourth year of a BA in Sociology and Gender Studies, and I'm also doing my third year of social work. So I'm super passionate about advocating for a safe space for our community while empowering individuals to grow in the best version of themselves. I want to thank the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences here at Memorial for connecting with our volunteer community at Intersections Student Resource Center to collaborate on this panel. We are a resource center at MUN and a safe community for the marginalized genders and sexualities here on campus or online. If you have any questions about gender and sexuality, sexual health and well-being, consent, resources in the area, or feel the need for a community who will support you non-judgmentally and wholeheartedly within your personal journey, you can always contact us on Facebook and email, and I'll post the links below and also on Facebook when this is released. However, for today, we are meeting with a few spectacular professionals whom I will get to introduce themselves in a few seconds. Em Spokane, Jen Dion, Justin Ryder, Stephanie Hallett, and after they introduce themselves, we will go ahead through a list of premeditated questions to get conversation flowing. But since this is about you learning about what you want, feel free to ask the facilitators in the Q&A chat below, who will forward the questions to us, and we will focus on what you want to learn. So we're looking forward to learning from the valuable insights of these beautiful people, and let's get started. We have joining us today Em Spokane, a queer and trans teacher who has been teaching at the primary elementary level since 2015. Em, would you like to tell us a bit more about yourself?
Sure, I can do that. So like you already mentioned, I am a teacher in the public school system here in Newfoundland and Labrador, and my pronouns are they, them. I did an undergraduate degree at McGill before I moved here. I have a Bachelor of Education from Memorial and a Master's in Social Justice Education, also from Memorial. And I'm the vice president of an NLTA Special Interest Council that myself and a principal from Fogo Island just formed this past year in the area of gender and sexual diversity. And special interest councils are designed to support teachers, but they have, kind of the added bonus that that's a trickle down to students as well.
Wow, inspirational, and a beautiful shirt indeed as well. Next, we have Jen Dion, who has been a part of our community here at MUN since 2019. Jen, would you like to tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Jen, as you can see on my title card. I use primarily she, her, and they, them pronouns. I generally identify as queer. My research that I did at MUN was a Master's of Gender Studies most recently in the world of disability studies. My undergrad was in English as well as gender studies. And I have graduated somewhat recently enough that it happened during the pandemic. So I didn't actually get a convocation because, pandemic reasons. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, framed where I have been, because I have ended a degree and started a new job during the time in which a pandemic has happened. So hello, everyone.
Sorry to hear that you never got the authentic graduation experience, but we are here to celebrate with you.
Thanks.
um, so next we have Justin Ryder, a production designer who creates digital experiences and interfaces for a travel tech startup based in Toronto. Would you like to tell us more about yourself?
Sure, thanks, Beth. I'm Justin, he, him pronouns. I graduated from MUN in 2013 with an undergrad degree in social anthropology. From there, I went to York University for my MA in social anthropology. Along the way, I was teaching myself graphic design, working a lot with, it was called LBGT MUN at the time, the Queer and Trans Resource Center at MUN, and continued doing graphic design for community groups when I moved to Toronto, and eventually transitioned into a career in design. And so now I work for a startup that's in the travel tech space, and I design software and websites and digital interfaces.
Wow. Like far beyond anything that I would ever imagine being able to do. So kudos to you. Great person. Next, we have Stephanie Hallett, last but not least, and she is a CEO of Diversity NL, providing strategic planning, needs assessment, benchmarking, and workforce training for the community. Stephanie, would you like to tell us a bit more about yourself?
Hey, Beth, thanks for hosting. And hey, everyone, great panel today. I don't know any of you, so it's wonderful to get here and to see what everyone's doing in this sector. So I guess I'm a new business owner. As of last February, I started Diversity NL. My pronouns are she and her and hers. I go by female pronouns. I'm a lesbian. I'm a fur mama of two. I have a wife and a lot of very supportive family and friends, which certainly makes being in this area certainly very welcoming for me to be in. And I acknowledge not everyone has had that welcoming opportunity to be in business and to always get the accepting piece of it, which is really important. And that's why I transitioned from almost 20 years in healthcare. I have a master's from Memorial in social work, a bachelor's in social work. I did all my education at social work. I think I lived there for many, many years. And I have a Bachelor of Arts from MUN as well. So myself and you, Bethany, have a lot in common, I guess, with our social work backgrounds. And I guess what we all have in common is all of our passions to be in this space of LGBTQ2S+. So I'm very passionate about that, helping educational facilities, helping businesses and organizations basically develop strategies, give education sessions, and really help people feel that they can bring their full authentic selves to the workplace, to schools. And that's very important being part of this community because we know it's somewhere around 13%. So that's a huge passion of mine to be able to help people feel accepted no matter where they're to or the space that they're going in.
Yeah, that's definitely an excellent example of the role our networks can play in our passions and careers. So we will go to the first question, and I would like to start with M, if that's okay. Awesome. What role did your work and network play in your job search, and how does it support you in your current role today?
So the way the Bachelor's of Education works is you actually have a cohort, and that was really the first time that I was able to connect with other queer educators. We found each other quite quickly, and that those relationships have continued into our work life. For example, you know, I'm able to touch bases with some of those people and just ask them about, you know, the specifics about a school where they might be or the inclusivity in a particular workplace. And that's really helped in terms of just looking at, you know, different procedures that schools have in place. Because while the province has policies, school culture really varies a lot from school to school, and that's been enormously helpful to have those connections that some of which I made at MUN during my first degree there.
So what I'm hearing is that throughout your education and throughout your pre-professional phase, you build connections. that you carried on into the future of your life, and that helped a lot with your work now?
Yeah, absolutely. And even now, like I know myself and one of these people had a conversation the other day regarding what we might like to do in our schools for Pride. And she shared what she was going to be doing in her school, just, a bit of an exchange of ideas. And it just really has been a great source of ideas and encouragement and support in my role as a teacher to see what other queer teachers are doing in other schools. It's an excellent way to not only share ideas, but to kind of having other people doing that work is really validating and gives a little bit of support to the importance of doing that work within the school building. So even in, like, I work in K to 6, it's almost kind of a given in high schools, but in the K to 6 system, while it's becoming much more common in Newfoundland schools to, for example, do an event around Pride, it's still not the norm. So yeah, seeing what other people are doing has been fabulous, because we're fabulous.
Beautiful. That's so cool. I have a couple of friends who are teachers, so I'm like, great. Just before we go forward, I would like to let everybody know that we are recording the session, just for your knowledge, if you need to leave and then come back later on and watch the beauty. So I'm wondering if you would like to carry on that conversation, Jen, since you also work, in education in a way.
Yeah, I think that in my instance, I was fortunate enough to be able to take part in an internship route for my master's. It wasn't really a thesis, it wasn't really a project. I did actually get to go out into the community and work with people with my physical self and not just put my work out into the world in hopes that someone would engage with it. So that was a very handy way of building that system that that those people around me who could be a part of my community and continue to further and support me in those ways. And in those, even though I'm not in that position anymore, it did serve to essentially create a job that I ended up working in for about a year over at the Blendon Center. So it was very handy to actually get into that space, prove the space as important and important to me, as well as create those networks with other people as well.
Definitely, and I can personally attest to the amazing work that the Blendon Center does and your involvement in it. Great. So I was wondering if you could give a little bit of insight into the outside academic world, Justin.
Am I muted? Oh, I'm not muted. Okay, great. Yeah, I can speak in terms of how my network has supported me. Really, like when I was transitioning into design, UX design and product design, I was helped enormously by gay people in my personal network, friends of friends, talking to friends about wanting to move into this field and being set up with information interviews with other queer people that were already in the field that my friends knew could help me out. And I think about those conversations all the time in terms of how they helped kind of build me up and give me confidence and knowledge to get into the field. And I continue to reach out to those people at these kind of, when I have these sort of crisis moments in my work life, and when I feel like I need support, I reach out to those people, and they're all, I value them so much as a resource. And I'd also speak in terms of network. Like I got involved with an organization in Toronto called Rainbow Railroad. It's an organization that tries to support people who are seeking asylum from countries that criminalize being queer or trans. And I met people in that network that were also able to support me in my professional life. And then lastly, I attend events frequently that are put on by this organization called Out on Bay Street. It's a network of LGBT professionals in Toronto. And that's actually where I heard of and learned about the company that I work for now. So yeah, I would say like I owe a lot, and I think I value a lot like the personal queer relationships I have in my life, and they've carved a path for me to move along to get into this field.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the time for our community is like central to how we navigate our decisions in life and how we navigate going towards our future, perhaps. Um, I know that you, Stephanie, probably have insight into more of like a leadership perspective on this. So it would be interesting to hear your perspective on how your network plays in where you have came today.
Yeah, so I worked, like I said, almost 20 years in healthcare, and transitioning over to be your own CEO that's been interesting, and a lot of knocking on doors. So coming from healthcare, most of my network was in healthcare. So I used LinkedIn. I almost broke LinkedIn. I think I have it broken, to be honest, from reaching out to companies and people. But people are really generous with their time, which I'm always amazed. People who don't know me, people that aren't part of the community, which is even more amazing. People who are part of the community are always fantastic, right? Always wanting to have a conversation, to engage, to network, which is awesome. But I've reached out to and joined their networks and literally have gotten business from that way, which from them not knowing me, like not having a connection with me, to them hiring me on as a full-time consultant for a year on contracts is just truly amazing to me. So I think using platforms like LinkedIn, connecting with people you don't know, connecting with businesses, and having a looking at their values and mission statements, and just getting to know people. So in Newfoundland, we always ask, who's your mother, who's your father, where you're from, so we get that deep-seated connection with people. So I find that it's been a little tough, during COVID, because we can't have that personalized coffee. So it's a lot of meetings that are on WebEx, Teams, or Zoom, which is great. But getting to know the person on a more intimate level is a little bit harder. And it takes a lot more effort, certainly. Like I said, it's always talk about the weather first, and then you talk about your kids, or you talk about your pets, or a commonality of interest and what brings us together. Because I think deep down, we all, as humans, we want to feel needed, and people want to feel loved and belonging. And I think that's why we're all doing what we're doing, is to help people in organizations understand, the community that we come from, and how we represent it, and everything from the language we use to the words we use. It creates great impact and meaning. So I've tapped a lot of networks I had no idea existed, to be honest, through LinkedIn and through friends of friends, and just people connecting me with, I think this business can use you, or I heard that they're looking into diversity, equity, and inclusion. It might be a good fit. So, I'll take all those recommendations and knock on doors all day long to try to help our community. In healthcare, it's our healthcare system is big. It's really big. The same as our school systems are really big. And thankfully we have teachers like Em that truly care and are making a difference. And, we need more folks within businesses and within organizations to start reaching out and, waving the flag more than once a year. It's 365 days, truly, right? Like, we need to get people on board with this. So I'm really passionate and love having these conversations with folks.
Anybody else has that Ren song singing in their mind now? Thanks. It's good to know that people now know they can reach out to you if they ever want to connect with that type of resource. So let's go on to the next question. We'll start with you again, Em. How do the different aspects of your identity connect with your career aspirations and values, and how did that impact the type of employment you pursued? I know that you alluded this to a little bit in the past, but let's dive deeper.
Yeah. So obviously, one of my interests is really supporting youth. I actually came out as queer later in life, but I also started teaching when I was 38. So, spoiler, I'm not 20. Uh, and so those two things kind of connected because when I look back to my own experiences in schools, they were very different from, the opportunities that exist now for children within the school system. Um, I often joke there was nobody was gay in my school. There was nobody. Obviously, that wasn't the case. It's just that that wasn't part of the conversation within schools or even within our culture. Um, so one of the things that kind of surprised me later is realizing, especially within the K to 6 school system, how few queer teachers there are. It's little bit different in junior high and high school, but in K to 6 there are very, very few. I've worked in 7 different schools, and only in 2 of them has there been another out teacher. So that has been a little bit eye-opening, but it just kind of reinforces my commitment to, sharing my identity with students. I run a school GSA. I've done that in a few different schools, and that's kind of one way. And I had the great pleasure this year, one of the many gifts that 2020 gave me was actually coming out as trans, and I've been able to share that journey with students this year. So that's, it really has brought home to me how important it is to be doing that work in schools and just bringing that, that personal identity into the way I teach and the way I relate to young people.
Yeah. You speak well when you leave your audience speechless. Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that such young kids are able to get the opportunity right now. Because even like when I was in junior high and high school, which was like not that long ago, um, that wasn't necessarily the case, even for junior high and high school. So it's great. Thank you. Would you like to continue this conversation, Jen?
Yeah,
Um,
sure. Um, I would say for me, the way that my identity connects is, I guess, beyond one of queerness, but also through the lens of accessibility based on, the world that I exist in and the frameworks that have worked in recently. And even in client support, even though I'm not actively out in like the London Center accessibility world, that still really much, very much informs how I want to assist clients and how I want to bring in personal experience into those interactions, even though they can be a little bit transactional. Like you come to us for help, we give you the assistance that you need, and you go about your day and about your way. Um, but there's oftentimes when you're on the phone, it's not necessarily in person anymore, but in live chat, where I can still bring in those experiences in those moments. I've had quite the opportunity to have pretty funny conversations with some professors at MUN that have actually centered around identity, even in live chat, well, helping someone get their bright space up and running, which you wouldn't think would actually happen, but it does, because people know you from being around campus, me having been a student around so often that my name is out there and they recognize who I am, and it has, fostered those conversations, and it's really helps me, feel part of the community at MUN, and that's been lovely despite being in the middle of a pandemic and the isolation that can feel like sometimes.
yeah, and I can definitely attest to, like, as a student, feeling much more comfortable with names and faces that are familiar than not. It can get intimidating sometimes. So thank you for staying committed to that. Justin. My apologies for mixing that up. Would you like to continue the conversation, please?
Sure. I'll share. The way that I got into design in the first place was I mentioned this when I introduced myself, but when I was volunteering at MUN with LBGT MUN, which I believe has changed its name since, but I don't know what their new name is. But I was volunteering there, and we were running a campaign. We wanted to do this queer and trans health awareness campaign, and we needed posters for some of the events that we were holding. And I had a pirated copy of Adobe Creative Suite, and so I volunteered to make the posters. And so I made these hideous designs so that we could advertise our events. And as we ran more events, I kept kind of being the go-to guy to do that stuff, and or to design any of our like marketing stuff or social media ads or our website. So that I really, because of I was able to fill this need that was in the service of delivering an impact that I really cared about for my community at MUN, for LGBT people at MUN, I kind of stumbled into this craft that I came to fall in love with as well. And so now I kind of owe it to my experience volunteering there to have discovered this passion that I've built my career on so far. And in the chat, they're saying it might be called Saga now, the resource center.
Yeah, so there's two primary resource centers at MUN. One is Saga and the other is Intersections. This panel is with Intersections Partnership, but Saga is also there, and they're very great. Yeah, that's actually very interesting to hear, Justin, because personally I know that poster making and advertisement is huge in the volunteer sector in clubs and societies at MUN, so it's really surprising to hear that such a foundation in volunteering can lead to a important and amazing career. It's actually, yeah, it's surprising, but it's also kind of like, wow, this actually does work out, you know? So thank you. That's great. And Stephanie, how about you?
With me, I was quite later coming out, in like 31 and a half years old. I came out of the closet. To me, that's late. It's too late. So growing up, being a part of the denominational educational system here in Newfoundland, so Catholic schools and different denominational schools. Certainly, it's funny. I had a conversation with my mom about a month ago, and she's like, well, why did you come out when you came out? And I'm like, are you kidding? To come out when I was a teenager, I would have been crucified in a Catholic school, whereas if you got divorced as a teacher, you were let go. So these are certainly different times, and hopefully things are becoming more accepting as we go on, and hopefully we'll all help create that space of more acceptance. But to me, in healthcare, I had the freedom, fortunately, of where I worked to and what I did as a manager and as a social worker, to be able to be who I was. And I really wanted to take that to a new space and a new level, helping college kids, university kids, young adults, millennials, Generation Zs to be able to help form that space, because unfortunately employers aren't always looking at DE&I. How do we best adapt what we have? How do we have the bathrooms that we should? How do we have the education that we need to have? And helping kind of raise the eyebrows and start to open up a window, if not a door, for certain things to happen within the business community, because it's very much so needed. And I saw that it didn't exist in some of the events and some of the things I went to, being part of that world, like really challenging people to think outside the box, because there's a whole lot we can all do as part of this community to forge forward. And I think it takes all of us to really start raising that awareness and creating support within our communities. And I was in a position to be able to do that. Like, I spent a long time thinking about opening up my own business, and help me with this. So just follow your passion, right?
Yeah. It's I don't want to use the word surprising again, but whatever. It's also surprising that you've come that long journey. You've come through that long journey from a student in a denominational school in Newfoundland to where you are now. So that's an incredible and deep journey. And I really give that to you. So thank you for that. A lot of you mentioned that co-curricular and volunteer experiences within LGBTQ2SIA+ groups have offered opportunities to develop great skills in leadership, communication, collaboration, and other highly valued skills by employers. So some of the experience that you have shared also reveal aspects of your identity may of your identity you may or may not wish to disclose to potential employers. And how did you navigate this within the job search? Would you like to start, Em?
Sure, I can start with that. So I was actually really already teaching before I started, so I kind of went backwards there. But I can see the potential challenge. Since since I started teaching, I have done a lot more volunteering, I mean, one of my favorite and most, sacred places and spaces on the planet is Camp Eclipse, which for people that aren't familiar with it is a camp for 16 to 24-year-olds. And there's also opportunity for leadership for, I believe the campers have to be maybe 18 to start that youth mentorship role, and then there are adult mentors. And I am fortunate to be in, a workspace where that is, valued. The province has explicit policies about, like our safe and caring schools policy explicitly spells out, inclusion and the rights of LGBTQ plus people in the workplace. So I haven't ever had to worry about that at all. And that would be considered, a bonus and never a detriment. I already mentioned the Special Interest Council that myself and another person started via the NLTA. And just for people that aren't familiar with those, the NLTA has them, like math teachers or science teachers. This one was the gender and sexual diversity one was a little bit of a step outside of that framework, but the NLTA was very delighted to support that, the teachers union. And that allows us, we're all volunteers, we're not paid for that, but we're given a significant chunk of funding that we can then use to support other teachers in their roles in schools and in professional development. So I've never felt that volunteering has ever been anything that I had to hide, and I'm very privileged and grateful for that.
I'm very thankful that you had a safe space to thrive in. Would you like to share some of your safe spaces, Jen?
Yeah, for sure. And I really like the question that you started off with, and I do think it's a really important question to be asking. I um, I guess I would start with how like the way that I've had to approach some of the I guess framing and building of approaching jobs in the past is very different from the way that I go about it now. As Em, you've said, like we have this like these like policies and like in a lot of spaces now. It's very welcoming and that's awesome. And I definitely have seen in the past, I definitely have filtered myself more when coming to apply for jobs where like I have not necessarily put the volunteer work or the community spaces that I occupy on my resume out of fear that that might not necessarily help my position. But nowadays, I think I definitely take more of the stance that I would never doctor my resume or omit any of those spaces or experience, because I feel like if someone is going to treat me differently or not hire me for that kind of work, then I don't know if I would want to be a part of their community, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know if that would be worth my time. And I definitely want to recognize the amount of privilege that is in me saying that, because I definitely wouldn't have been able to say that even just like 5 years ago. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think that's where my answer lies.
Yeah, that's a lot to swallow. I admire you for that, and I do hope that that will become the wider opinion in days and years to come. Would you like to allude to your experience, Justin?
Sure. My experience is a little bit similar in terms of having had kind of the privilege to be in a space where there's a level of acceptance. I wish I had something more dramatic story about this to share, but I've really been, I don't think I've ever interviewed somewhere where I haven't talked about it, like talked about my queer identity, maybe not my identity necessarily, but talking about my experience with queer and trans organizations, because that's just such a part of my my story. And if I've ever had experiences where the vibe is weird after mentioning that part of my background, then I just know that's not a place I'm going to choose to work with, which is a super lucky, like privileged place to be coming from. So that's been fortunate for me.
It's wonderful how, as we gain more self-empowerment and privilege and awareness of our position in that, we also gain more acknowledgement into how to set up healthy boundaries. So Stephanie, could you continue the conversation with your perspectives?
Yeah, for sure. I guess we're all bringing up privilege, and we're certainly all privileged in different ways. We're all here very well educated in certain areas, and that allows us things that other people would not. We're all, from what I can see, we're all Caucasian here. We have a mixture of different parts of our community represented here. So we're all privileged in different ways, and I bring my full self to work every day. So if a company doesn't want to hire me because I'm lesbian or part of this community, they know what I represent. And to be honest, I only want to work with places who want to do work on DE&I efforts and those who want to support us as a community. I think it's really important for us to be able to, and not everyone can, be able to make a stand and say, this is who I am, and this is what I represent, and this is who I will and won't work with or for. So, I think we're all within that space of making decisions at times of who we decide to work with and connect with on things. So that's really important. And I know not everyone does. Not everyone has the ability to do that, because not everyone is fully out, or not everyone maybe knows who they are or what they are. So it's, I think it's a privileged space for me to be in, and I'm very blessed with those I know and those I'm making connections with. Yeah.
And I'm a strong advocate for stories and community being a strong force of facilitating diversity and inclusion. I feel like stories help people gain freedom and also share freedom at the same time. So we are getting near to our end of our panel. I think we will conclude a bit more with a couple of practical questions, I guess. So one of the questions that we would love to ask as a part of the student community is, how did you represent your gender identity on your resume? What advice do you have for students about how they can represent their identity? And perhaps even like also include a little bit about the cover letter part as well. Like I personally would appreciate that too. Would you like to start it off, Ben, please?
Sure, I can start that. However, we actually we don't use resumes in teaching. So we have like an online profile, and I actually went in and checked, and as far as I can tell, it does not ask your gender anywhere on that profile, which I was really happy to see. Obviously, there are references on there, and I actually had to have an explicit conversation with my administrators from previous years who were giving me a reference to say, I know when I worked for you, you knew me as this, but could you please use these pronouns in my reference? And it was no problem. And again, I'm fairly established in teaching, so I'm fortunate to be able to do that. But I just like to echo what a lot of other people have said. I wouldn't want to ever feel like I had to kind of, hide that or disguise it, and then later end up in a workplace where that was going to be a challenge for me or for other people. I would some ways prefer to know and want, if there's a bit of a self-selecting process, then so be it. And it's worked out quite well in teaching. So.
Thanks. Yeah, I honestly haven't thought of like the lack of the need for it being a positive thing. So thanks for reframing that in my mind. I appreciate that. Jen, would you like to continue the conversation, please?
Yeah, no problem. So for me, I do have a link to my LinkedIn on my resume that when I apply for jobs, I definitely share, and it has my profile picture on it, and it's me wearing a pretty swanky looking corset vest and a tie at my wedding. Like you can't really get beyond what I like when you see it. I hope that some people see queerness. Like that is what I am trying to give off. That's the energy that I like. I get dressed every morning. I know what I look like, and I hope I give that energy. And I hope I make people question that. Like I like to go to the store and have someone like some kid look at me and be like, what are you? That makes me happy. I like that. And if an employer goes through that experience as well, I'm kind of all right with it. As for like my pronouns and stuff like that, I don't usually put that on my resume. And hear me out. It's because I don't particularly care what pronouns people use for me. And it's not because I'm trying to censor myself or that I'm not trying to get a job because I sometimes use they them pronouns. It's honestly just you can't really gender me wrong because I don't feel that super strong connection to that anyhow or connection to that pronoun. So it's more of a creative choice than a protest or a statement, I suppose. But I would definitely encourage people who feel comfortable doing it, bringing that into their resume. And I think that's like really great representation to be doing whenever you're safe to do so, or don't feel like that would compromise your outness or the job itself. And as for the cover letter, as you kind of wanted to go into there, whenever the job itself encourages like diversity or lived experience, I definitely bring it in there and use that because you can always swing some pretty creative queer spaces. Like I know that there's some pretty cool like Tumblr and Twitter and Discord groups out there that are pretty cool spaces. And if you're a mod on one of those really big servers or something like that, you can swing that for some pretty cool work experience. Like, hey, I'm in charge of like thousands of people and helping monitoring these spaces. And if you're applying for a job that's applicable to, heck, bring it in. Go for it. Yeah.
I will write that down in the centers of my heart. Yeah, that is fantastic. I helped with the ACE conference once, and I definitely will like use that in the future now. um, Justin, how about you?
Yeah, well, in terms of how I've kind of marketed myself to recruiters via like CVs, I think a CV should be very like basic, bare, minimalist, concise, and it's really more on LinkedIn or a personal website if that applies to your field where your sort of personality or brand can shine through. Um, in terms of like identifying your gender identity on in those spaces, I really have no idea. Like, I have never done that, and I don't know enough about that to give advice either way. I would say I have, because to me it's important that that I identify queerness in some way. I've included like reference to uh, diversity inclusion advocacy in like my LinkedIn tagline or my website's like slogan. So I've done it in that place.
Honestly, guys, after this conversation, I'm gonna go do my LinkedIn. Y'all inspire me. How about you, Stephanie?
I'm definitely queer all day long. I'm part of the community all day long, no matter what space I'm in. I am who I am. So last time I wore a dress was on our wedding day, some 8 years ago. There was a whole lot of conversation around what we should wear because we didn't want, the stereotypical, well, who's the guy and who's the girl. We didn't want that conversation at our wedding. So it's always interesting of, the way you want to portray yourself at certain times. I think if this was potentially now and the comfort level I have with myself, that things would look different. I always use my pronouns. LinkedIn is where I do a lot of business and a lot of connections. To me, it's a safe space where I can do work, and I haven't had to do resumes. I do profiles of me and my business, and there's a picture there, and it's a slogan on a T-shirt, and it's "Love is love," and it's a slogan, something like that, or it's representing who I feel that I am at this time, and it does have my pronouns. Take with that not everyone's comfortable using a pronoun, and not everyone has a pronoun. But employers, let's be honest, a lot of times will judge based on what's on your resume. I always say to folks I'm working with in businesses is let's try blind resumes. Like, let's take the person's name out. Let's take any reference to any gender that might be on there out. I always say let's talk gender identity, not gender. That's important. It's how people identify and who they feel that they truly are, not their gender, male, female, other, non-binary. Like, we shouldn't put people in boxes. It's my whole piece is that, people are people and let them self-express. So giving people that opportunity. And so with Justin, like same thing when I used to do resumes, it was a lot of white spaces, but I did represent myself. Because I think if you're going into certain businesses and organizations, you really need to do your homework and research about where their values are, what they believe in. Do they have equity, diversity, inclusion statements? Like, what do they represent themselves? To feel that you can fit into that organization. I don't think there should be a fit. You should be adding to their culture. You're the culture add. You're able to add to that community, which I always say, like, let's add to spaces. Not everyone looks the same around the table, right? So we need to start mixing things up and being diverse. Be bold. That's tough. It's a challenge.
Yep. I'll take a moment of silence. Yeah, wow. What a privilege. Okay, let's get back on track. I guess we can ask ourselves how MUN can better support our current students of the QS LGBTQIA+ community. because eventually we will, all navigate the employment post-graduation phase. So what resources can be provided to prepare us for work? Would you like to start, Em?
I guess mostly just, including students in kind of that conversation around what options are available. Like I'm kind of inspired listening to people here who have, created their own. I've, followed what may be considered kind of a traditional career path. But just that the options to also set out on your own and make your own space, create your own work. With your training at MUN, I think would be really valuable, and certainly when I was first starting work was not part of a conversation that we were having within universities or high schools or anywhere. But beyond that, I mean, it's while I did do some degree work at MUN recently, I feel like, I've been in the workplace kind of long enough now that I'm going to kind of pass that one off to other people. I feel like they might have more to say on that too.
Thank you. And we have learned abundance from you. So thank you for that as well. Would you like to continue, Jen?
Yeah, I'm going to try to half answer this question. So I'm going to say one of the barriers that I've faced post like graduation and looking for like how to navigate the world post graduation, because I kind of started working while at MUN, if that makes sense. Like I started working as an employee at MUN in my program in my master's. So like there wasn't really a seamless end to MUN. It was just kind of like it continued on. One barrier that I have seen come up is what we do for, I guess, medical services post graduation. Like I don't think I was prepared to face the lack of like comprehensive gender and sexuality inclusive healthcare in the province, I suppose, or just like lack thereof. Like doctors and medical professionals. I know that's not really like specifically work related, and I'm lucky enough to like have insurance and all that jazz. But having some kind of idea of how to support students as they exit MUN into the world of both work and being a well human being that can offer themselves to work or volunteer time, that wholeness, that health that you want to maintain is very important, and I think would be very helpful.
I think that's actually pretty important because I have a lot of friends who talk about the lack of medical professionals in care who are inclusive, even. There, it's on record. How about you, Justin?
Yeah, I'm thinking about this question in terms of how can MUN like produce or create people who are leaving the institution with resiliency, and I think, and so that like when you're out in the world that you can tolerate and learn from and navigate kind of all the ups and downs that happen. And I think if I could go back and work with now Saga LBGT MUN again, if I could go back 8-10 years or whatever, I would put all of my energy into getting more funding for that resource center. I remember when we were there, we had $1,000 a year to do whatever we could do with. We could have a few pizza parties and movie nights, but we had a drive to do so much more than that, and we wanted to have a much bigger impact on the LGBTQ student population at MUN, and we were very blocked by not having the resources. So I would say MUN could, give $50K, I don't know, the cash money to the resource center so that queer students, queer and trans students can create programming and resources for queer and trans students to build that resiliency. The money, give them the money.
Thank you. I don't know what to say about that, so I'm going to proceed to Stephanie.
Oh, well, we know that, certainly there's underfunding there represented within the student organizations. We know that for a fact. Unfortunately, and I don't know if it's going to get any better given the most recent reports that we've all heard. Queering curriculum, something that faculties talk about, doesn't always happen. People aren't overly educated. Education, and it's an educational facility. So we need to start with giving some education. I say we have 30 to 40 years to make up for, unfortunately. Our kids now are much more accepting than what kids were when we certainly went to school, I suggest, in many different areas. So, there's a lot of education that's needed for professors. How do they introduce themselves these days? It's been a few years since 2013 since I've been there. I don't know, are they using their pronouns, or are they using asking students their preferred name? Like, I don't know how some of those things look, but certainly looking at some of those, giving the education for folks that are there. Some folks have been there for many, many years, and heteronormativity certainly exists within our educational facilities. We're here, we're queer, and we're here all day long. So people need to help as we transition into workplaces. What do folks, what are they doing? What are those conversations? We need to give voices to people so those can happen, potentially between, I guess it would be through SAGA or different folks at MUN with, I guess, the administration at MUN. I don't know what those conversations look like these days, but certainly there should be spaces where people are heard and can put a voice out there to raise any concerns or things that are happening. Safe spaces is truly important in creating our safe communities.
Yeah, I agree, and the volunteer people at Intersections agrees as well. Like, we wouldn't exist if we weren't needed. There is stories which are alarming, and there's stories which are celebratory. I myself am privileged to be a sociology, gender studies, social work student, so I get those spaces. I know a lot of students who are outside of my program who don't necessarily get those spaces as much. So that's why it's important for the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences and other faculties to partner with clubs and societies and amazing people like you who are on the forefronts of advocacy and who are on the forefronts of making an inclusive community. So I would like to thank you, Stephanie and Justin, Jen, and Em. And I would also like to thank Andrea and Terry from the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences. It's been a great privilege. It's been a great honor. I literally could listen to all of you for like hours. I'm going to go and do some deep reflection, and I'm sure that many other students will as well. I would like to remind students that Intersections is here to support you if you ever need support. We have some information on the attendees thing down here, and we also have Intersections Facebook page, and we're also on Thrive if you ever need to get any more information. So everybody be well, take care of yourselves, take a little time outside, and pet a dog or something.